John chapter 21. Getting ready to start John chapter 21. We finished chapter 20 last week. We did, didn't we? I think we got through 20 last week. Last week we went through all the other books that are around that we have, like the book of Enoch and the book of Jasher and all those books that are mentioned in the Bible and multiple others that we don't actually put in the gospel. But there's all sorts of things that was written about Jesus that if it was written, there wouldn't be enough books of all the things and wonderful things that he done. So, and then we talked about the twofold purpose of the writing of the Gospel of John in verse 31, written so that you might believe Jesus is the Son of God and that you might have life through his name. Okay, John chapter 21. The breakdown of the chapters is chapter 1, verse 1 to 14 is the attempted return of the disciples to their former lives. You'll see that many of them tried to go back to what they were doing prior to Jesus until Jesus came. Verse 15 to 23 is Jesus' intervention on this backsliding and gives them direction for the future. And then verses 24 and 25 are his closing words. All right, chapter 21, verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and on this wise he showed himself. The Sea of Tiberias. It has a name that you might find more common. It's also called the Sea of Galilee. It's also called the Sea of Gennesaret in Luke chapter 5. It's called the Sea of Chinnereth in Numbers chapter 34, or Chinneroth. Had a whole bunch of different names, right? Chinneroth is in Joshua chapter 12, verse 3. So it had a whole bunch of different names, but that's not really the point. The point is they're on the Sea of Galilee, and he reveals himself. Now, we don't know how much time has passed. It just says after these things. So it could have been a day, could have been a week, could have been a couple, I had no clue. But it does say that he showed himself, and it says he showed himself, this wise showed he himself. So he says the story is written for a purpose, right? And this is to show how he revealed himself. Verse 2, they were together, Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus and Nathanael of Cana of Galilee and Simon and the sons of Zebedee and two other disciples. So we see Simon Peter, we see Thomas, we see James and John, and two unnamed disciples. Oh, and Nathanael. I forgot Nathanael. So and Nathanael of Cana. Cana, if you remember, was where Jesus' first public miracle took place. That was the turning the water into wine at the wedding, right? That's John chapter 2. And we first read Nathanael. He's mentioned in John chapter 1. John chapter 1, verse 45 says, Philip findeth Nathanael, and saith unto him, We have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, Come and see. Let's go ahead and keep reading. Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and saith of him, Behold, an Israelite indeed is in whom is no guile. Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, thou wast under a fig tree, and I saw thee. And Nathanael answered and said unto him, Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, and thou art the King of Israel? And Jesus answered and said unto him, Because I have said unto thee, I saw thee under a fig tree. Believest thou? Thou shalt see greater things than these. And he said unto them, Verily I say unto you, hereafter you shall see heaven open up, and angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man. So that's the only time Nathanael is really mentioned other than here. He's only mentioned in the Gospel of John. He's only mentioned in the Gospel of John, and that's because he's believed to have been Bartholomew. Bartholomew and Nathanael were likely the same person. Bartholomew is likely his surname, actually, meaning son of Ptolemy. Bar Ptolemy. Bar means son of. Ptolemy is whoever his father's name is, or the house of his father's name. So instead of Bar Ptolemy, they call him Bartholomew, right? So he could have been Nathanael Bar Ptolemy. And that's what a lot of scholars refer to him as. There is no direct verse saying they're the same, but when you don't see Nathanael on the list of the disciples outside of John. He's in John, but he's not in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and he's not in Acts. So those lists of disciples are in Matthew 10, Mark 3, Luke 6, and Acts 1. And all of them have Bartholomew in it, but they don't have Nathanael. So that's why a lot of them seem to think that Nathanael and Bartholomew are the same person, because John has Nathanael and all the other ones have Bartholomew. Do you have something?
Everybody who's listed here comes from Galilee.
Yes.
And they were all in the fishing business.
Yep, they're all fishermen.
It's no surprise that John, who's one of Zebedee's boys,
Was fishing.
calls him something else.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, he was familiar with them, and he was.
People call you by your last name, and they call you by your first name.
They do. Yeah. Yep. Since so when it's funny, people at church when I first got here, they were like, "So what do we call you?" Call me whatever you want. Preacher, pastor, hey you, Neil, whatever. Doesn't matter to me.
I want to answer to Dennis.
I answer to Dennis every day. I do. I answer to Dennis every day at work. My wife's back there shaking her head. I don't like that. Right. I can't help that, but that's just. They knew. I told them I didn't want my preferred name was Neil when I went to work, and they printed me out name tags on day one, and guess what they said? Dennis. So it is what it is. I've dealt with it my whole life. But anyway, so in the list of all those people, and you are correct, it's quite possible that John called him by his first name and everybody else called him by his last name or surname.
He was, when I say
he was a fisherman.
He wasn't a publican.
Right.
Like Matthew.
Yes, he was.
Wasn't a physician. Like
Correct.
Luke.
He wasn't like Luke or Matthew.
He wasn't somebody's nephew like Mark.
Yep.
He was one of his buddies.
And I like that the way that they introduced Nathanael. I like the way they introduced him. And that story has always struck me as odd yet intriguing, because Jesus just happened to see him under a fig tree, and he said something to him, and he says, there's an Israelite in there in whom is no guile. And he said, do I know you? And he says, yeah, I saw you under a tree. And he says, you got all that from seeing me under a tree? And Jesus says, if you think that's good, just wait. Yeah. I always liked the way that happened. And Nathanael, he says, you said that about me? And he says, yep. And he goes, that's my God right there. He just had claimed it right there. He says, all right, I'll follow you. He goes, I like this guy. He complimented me the first time I said something to him. That's the one I'm going to follow. So I always thought I always got a kick out of that. All right, verse 3. So so we see Simon, Peter, Thomas, Nathanael of Cana, and the sons of Zebedee, and two other disciples. So what do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 of them, right? Did I miscount that? I went to public school. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. 7 of That figures there's 7 of them. It's that number 7. But anyway, there's 7 of them out there. And Simon Peter saith unto them, I go a fishing. And they say unto him, we also go with thee, and went forth. And they went forth and entered into a ship immediately. And that night they caught nothing. So Peter's backsliding here, right? He's going back to his old life. Jesus is dead. Even though he's seen Jesus crucified, resurrected, he still goes out fishing.
He's afraid.
He kind of, I'd say so. I'd say that they're all kind of afraid. Remember the last 2 times we saw all the disciples together, where were they?
In the upper room.
They were in an upper room and the doors were closed and they were out of fear, right? That was done out of fear. I dare say they were all afraid. But he told them, we're not done yet. You know, Jesus has said, hey, you know, we're going to, what was the last thing Thomas said? My Lord and my God? Yeah, and he goes, well, you guys are going to see some things, and we're going to have some fun with this. But Peter here is kind of backsliding. He goes back to his former life. And we know that Simon Peter and Andrew and his brother and the Zebedees were fishermen. And we know that from Matthew chapter 4, verses 18 and 19. So we know they're all fishermen. It's safe to say Nathaniel was as well, right? And Thomas. That's the passage where they say, Jesus says, follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. That's that passage. So Peter is trying to get back into his old life that he had been pulled out of when Jesus Christ said, hey, come on, guys, let's go, right? And when he's backsliding, he brings others with him. And there's something to be said about that. It's real easy when you backslide to pull somebody with you. It's real easy when you used to be a Christian or you are a Christian but you're not serving. It's real easy to pull somebody who's trying to do something right along with you. Don't be that guy, right? Don't be that stumbling block for your brethren. And it's real easy to get discouraged, and I understand they're discouraged here. I understand their whole belief system was kind of upended there for a couple days, and they're still trying to figure this out in real time. I mean, we can look at this and we can say, well, we have the scriptures to show us, and we understand everything that Paul wrote, and we understand Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and we understand John here, and so we can, and that's because we've studied it. We've read it enough times. We've known enough people who've taught it enough times to say, I have a really good understanding of what the Gospel of John's trying to say. But they were doing this in real time. So it was all new. So don't be too terribly hard on them. They were confused. They were up, they probably should have been doing right. They probably should have been, with the Lord already. But they went out fishing. But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Now, you'll notice that they didn't catch nothing. When you're backslidden, there's not much fruit, is there? You're not going to catch anything if you're not fishing with the right bait, right? They went out fishing for the sake of fishing because they didn't have anything else to do, just to go back to what they were doing prior to Jesus Christ. And that was unprofitable. And without Jesus Christ, it doesn't matter what you do; it's unprofitable. And that's what they did. They went out without Christ. They went out not in the name of the Lord. They went out on their own accord. And what did it bring? What did it profit? Absolutely nothing. And we're going to see here that when the Lord gets in it, there's something about it. So in verse 4, he says, "But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples knew not that it was Jesus." Again, I'm not really sure if they were far enough away that they didn't recognize Jesus, but they said they didn't recognize Jesus. It doesn't tell us how far off the shore there is. Obviously, he had to be close enough to be able to see somebody there on the shore and hear them, right? So that it was within earshot, okay? It does say in verse 8 that they weren't far from land because they were close enough to communicate, right? That's verse 8.
3 cubits
and verse 5. Well, 200 cubits was the net they were pulling, I thought. Maybe, unless I just, off the top of my head, I was doing that wrong. Oh, yeah, there were 200 cubits, yep.
Yeah, that's about 100 yards.
Yeah, they were about 200 cubits off. So that's verse 8. But it might just be like at the tomb too, that they just didn't recognize him. They didn't recognize him. Well, Mary was standing right next to Jesus, and she didn't recognize him. That might be what it is. The guys on the road to Emmaus were walking with him, having a conversation with him. They broke bread with him, and that's when they finally realized that it was Jesus. So they recognized him then. So it might be that Jesus didn't allow himself to be recognized, right? But either way, they didn't recognize him, at least not yet, until verse 5. And then then Jesus saith to him, Children, have ye any meat? And he answered, No. Okay, this is once again, we talked about this concept before. Did Jesus know that they didn't have any fish in the boat? So why did Jesus ask the question?
To make sure that they had the answer.
Well, it's the same reason that he asked Mary Magdalene, who are you looking for? He knew who Mary was looking for. He asked the question to insert himself into the conversation. And he asked him a pertinent question. Hey, we do this all the time. You see anybody fishing on the side of the road, you see someone fishing on the dock, any luck? Did you catch anything? No, I got a couple bluegill and a bunch of catfish. That's a pretty crappy day, right? But we do, that's exactly what we did. Hey, did you catch anything? Have you any meat? That's what he was asking. He said, you got anything? Did you catch anything worth eating? Nothing, right? And I say that up in the north we eat catfish. Down here we don't eat catfish, right? Saltwater catfish. Let me say that. Freshwater catfish is all right. But the saltwater catfish, we don't eat that up here. But anyway, so he asks if they caught anything, and he asks so that he can insert himself into the conversation. He asks so they can recognize who is talking to them, right? And maybe, just maybe, knowing Jesus Christ to rub that in a little bit. Did you catch anything? No, we ain't caught nothing all night, right? Remember John 15:15, for without me ye can do nothing? We went through that pretty quick. But without Jesus Christ, they weren't going to be profitable, right? But now that I'm here, I'm going to make you catch something. That's what happens in verse 6. And he says unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. And Jesus tells them, go ahead and cast the net on the right side. They still didn't know it was Jesus. But for some reason they honored the word of a stranger. That doesn't make any sense. These were experienced fishermen. And like you said, they were only a few hundred cubits away, right? So, from shore. So they knew the waters. They knew them well enough to know that if I've been fishing all night, I ain't going to catch fish right here. But for some reason, they honored a total stranger and said, all right, we'll give it one more shot. We'll toss the net out. And they caught so many fish, they couldn't bring the nets in. I heard a preacher preach this one time, and he says, and his message was, a few moments in the presence of the Lord is more profitable than an entire night of toiling on your own. That's a good message. I mean, all Jesus did was talk to him. And what did they do? They honored the request of a stranger. We've been fishing all night, mister. There ain't going to be nothing here on the side of this boat. We're getting ready to come in. We're tired. Everything's going on. I mean, it's why there's no need for me to toss the net over here. But for some reason they did it. And that profited something. So I mean, you can take a couple lessons from this. One is, when the Lord says something and you follow it, even if it sounds foolish, there's a blessing there. I mean, he'll bless it. I mean, the Lord sometimes tells you to do some foolish things in order to test your whether or not you'll actually do what you're going to do. I mean, look at what he did. I mean, look at what he did to Hosea. Look what he did to Ezekiel. I mean, he told Ezekiel to lay on his one side, shave one side of your head, lay on your side for so many days at the gate, and make sure everybody knew that the reason you're doing it was they walked into the gate. And then he says, when you're done with that, go ahead and flip over to the other side and tell everybody about again on from the other side. And he says, here, you got to have a special diet during that time too. He looked like a nut, didn't he? I mean, can you imagine that? That's the crazy preacher. That's that man of God who's out there just being a nut job. He told Hosea to marry a harlot to prove a point to the nation of Israel. I mean, some of God's people have been told to do some crazy things in the name of the Lord. And sometimes he tells you, something that's a little off character just to see if you're willing to do something, step out for the Lord. And that's what he did. He told them to do something, and they did it. And what happened? He blessed it. That's true of the Lord with you and I. He asked you to step out for him. He asked you to do something, even if you think it's not profitable, even if you think it's not going to do any good. He asks you to go do something, and you go do it. What happens? You're going to get blessed. I promise you. Well, preacher, I did this for the Lord. I'm not talking about right here. You might not get it right now, but you'll be blessed. That faithfulness, that obedience is honored by God. And what he's doing here is he told a bunch of fishermen how to fish. I bet that went over like a lead balloon in some circles. But for some reason they honored it, and they did it, and they were blessed. Did you have something before I move on?
This happened before when they were being called.
Mm-hmm.
And Peter argued with them.
Yeah, he did.
And that's when he got the big surprise.
Yeah.
So it may be that he said, hey, we got nothing to lose.
Yeah,
That's over, and we'll see what happens.
You're correct. There is a close similarity to the first time he told them to cast the net over the side, and this is 3 years later,
But when
right?
they did it,
When they did it, they cast the nets over the side and they caught a bunch of fish. So they're like, well, it worked for us. Remember that? Hey guys, remember the last time that some guy told us to throw the net over? Yeah. So I mean, maybe they learned their lesson. That's a good point to learn there too. That if you learn from your mistakes, you don't even have to argue with the Lord the second time. You can just do it and be done, right, and be blessed. But that whole thing about a few minutes in the presence of the Lord is more profitable than an entire night of toiling on your own power. You ever think about that for a second? You ever go car shopping? I hate car shopping. Absolutely despise it. I hate car shopping. You look at a million cars, a bunch of people try to sell you stuff that you don't need and you don't want, and they always try to make you spend more and all this other good stuff. Maybe if we prayed in the presence of God, and to get the right car at the right price, you might find it quickly instead of wasting all your time. We don't ever pray when you go do that. I mean, do you guys honestly think about praying before you go car shopping? I mean, see, here's the thing. If we just spend a few minutes in prayer and getting some guidance from God, don't you think that's a little more profitable than the trial and error nonsense that we try out here on this world? If we can just get a little bit of direction, why do we constantly try to do things on our own ability and power? Why is it so ingrained in man that I can do it? I don't need no stupid instructions. I can do it, right? And the wife's sitting there, just the instructions in her hand, just waiting for the husband to say, all right, give me those things. But, a few minutes spent with his blessing and presence can save you countless headaches and heartaches. But we never stop and take the time. And that's what the devil tries to do. This is not just a human thing. This is something that the world system and the devil has put in place. We're always in a hurry. We're always rushed to do something. I mean, are we not? Are we not always on our way somewhere to do something? Why? Because we think if we sit and relax and not have anything to do, that we're wasting time. Well, that time isn't wasted if you're spending it with the Lord. It's not wasted. If you just spend a few minutes with Him in prayer, asking for some guidance and asking for His presence in your decision or whatever it is, the results can be dramatic. And I don't mean that saying, well, it can. I mean the results can be dramatic. I mean, if you do something and you do it prayerfully versus you just doing something willy-nilly, it's just night and day, the results. The preacher who just gets up here and I don't need to study, I know the Bible, and he just goes. Well, if you're not prepared, if you haven't studied, if you've not been prayed over that, look, the preacher's supposed to pray over his messages. And if he's just writing stuff just to write stuff, well, that sounds good. It's not going to be effective. It's not going to make a difference in people's lives. He needs to be prayerful. A few minutes in His presence can cause inspiration you'll have enough sermons and enough writing material for a lifetime in just a few moments in His presence. And that blessing is something else when you get a blessing. Isn't it nice that when you pray about something and you ask for guidance and you feel like you got the right direction and you go and do it and you see an immediate blessing? Isn't that nice? I mean, isn't that something else? That's a physical and visible and real manifestation of something that people say doesn't exist. I mean, that's how you have evidences. That's how, that verse that says you're fully persuaded in your own mind? That's how you become fully persuaded in your own mind that the Lord is real when He does things like that, right? When He answers your prayers. When you pray for something and He shows it to you and He gives it to you. I mean, man, that's something. The first time you might chalk it up as coincidence. Second time you maybe start thinking about it. But when He does it the third time, there's only so much that can be a coincidence. It's only so much it can be what they call luck before it starts to be something designed. And that's a blessing to really see that. So in verse 7, so He tells him in verse 6, cast the net out on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. And they cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. And notice what the first response is. Therefore, the disciple whom Jesus loved said unto Peter, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. Now we're going to stop there for just a second. Because John says it's the Lord. Apparently, he was the most discerning. He was the one who was the most spiritually minded of the group, I guess. Because as soon as a blessing happened, what was the first thing that he said? It's the Lord. That says something about John. Maybe he recognized His voice, but he couldn't place it. Or maybe it was that the Lord just allowed Himself to be recognized, and he was the first person to do it. Right? When they're trying to pull in that net, and they're like, what in the world just happened? There shouldn't be any fish here. There's no structure. There's no nothing. But he looked up and he saw the man and he says, He remembered. That's the Lord. Remember, because this happened before, right? The same story happened before. And Peter argued with him last time, like you said. So when they started pulling that net in and it was so heavy they couldn't drag it in, John put two and two together. That's the way I do with my kids. Like if I'm trying to yell at one of my kids, I go through at least 3 of them before I get to the right one. Sometimes I'll even throw a dog's name in there too, right? I can't help it. It's just my brain's weird. But anyway, so the disciple whom Jesus loved, which we all know to be John, he put the 2 and 2 together, and he says it's the Lord. Maybe because he was the most discerning, maybe it's because he had a little bit quicker wit, and he was able to put, story at the beginning of John, story at the end of John together. All right, now let's finish this verse. Therefore, the disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, it is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. Okay, so two things here. John recognized first that it was the Lord. And why is Peter naked? Why is Peter naked?
He's fishing. He's working.
He's working. Okay. Now,
He don't want to get his robe dirty.
Now, some say that the word naked doesn't mean completely unclothed or completely exposed. And we should really look about how the Bible defines the word naked. Okay? Naked is found 47 times in Scripture. Nakedness is found 57 times. For, what is that? 114 times. Okay, 114 times naked or nakedness is found in the 104 times. Again, I went to public school. Leave me alone. Let's look at Genesis chapter 2.
That means naked.
Genesis chapter 2. It's not hard to figure out who we're talking about here. Look at verse 25. 2 verse 25. And he says, and they were both naked. This is Adam and Eve, man and wife, and were not ashamed. Okay? And then after the temptation and they fell, right? They realized what was the first thing that they realized about them when they can realize they could sin? They realized they were naked, and they made themselves loincloths out of figs or some sort of plants. Okay? So they knew they were naked. This is naked, right? Because it literally says they had to fashion themselves some clothes because they didn't have any. And then when the Lord came along, he says, who told us you were naked? Who told you that? He says, by the way, did you eat of that tree that I told you not to? How do you know you're naked? The only way you can do that is if you ate of that tree. Did he already know the answer? He already knew the answer, right? But he asked it anyway. That's a real good way, by the way, if you take that pattern, that's a real good way of you figuring out something about somebody else is if you just ask some questions. Right? If you're trying to figure out somebody's motive about it, just ask them. Could you repeat that, please? Did you mean to sound disrespectful when you said that? Because that's the way it came across. Would you please rephrase that unless you were trying to be disrespectful? And you'll see if they want to be disrespectful. Right? Naked. He was naked. She was naked too. And Adam and Eve ended up feeling shame because they realized they were naked and that there was a need for some clothes. Now, when the Lord showed up and he asked them, who told you were naked? And Eve said, Adam said, it's the woman you gave me. And woman said, it's that serpent that beguiled me. And then he cursed the serpent. And then what did he do? He went and killed an animal. It doesn't say what animal, but he went and killed an animal. And he ended up making some grave clothes. It was their grave clothes. Some loincloths for them. Now, if the Lord is consistent, my guess is he took a lamb and he killed it, but it doesn't say that he took a lamb. It says he killed an animal, and he made them clothes out of the skins and the fur of the animals. Why? Because there was sin present, and blood is required for remission of sins. We went through that a couple weeks ago when we went through John. And in Hebrews. We went through that in Hebrews as well. So in order for us to be crystal clear what nakedness means, or naked means, turn to Isaiah. Isaiah chapter 20. Isaiah chapter 20, verse 1. In the year that Tartan came to Ashdod, where Sargon the king of Assyria met him and fought against Ashdod and took it, at the same time spake the Lord by Isaiah the son of Amoz, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins, and put off thy shoe from thy foot. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. And the Lord said, like as my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia, so shall the king of Assyria lead the way the Egyptians prisoners and the Ethiopian captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, even with their buttocks uncovered, to the shame of Egypt. I think I understand what the word naked means now, right? Now, nakedness and nakedness seems to imply here that you can have feet on and still be considered naked. Because it says naked and barefoot. It implies that if you have something on your foot, you're still naked. So that whole thing about being improperly dressed is considered nakedness. Okay? Revealing some things is considered nakedness. So back in the Gospel of John, Peter's naked. He didn't just have some underclothes on. Peter was naked. And a couple of things. It was probably pretty hot, and he was working. According to Schofield and according to Sam Gipp, this was probably in May or June, and he probably wanted to take a little dip at a time or two while he was working, and he didn't want to get all his clothes all wet. That's the explanation that you gave, Dutch. And there's only 2 ladies in here, but this is something you may or may not know. Probably do, because you've both been married for a time. It's also not at all that uncommon for men to be naked in the presence of other men and not feel any kind of shame. It is what it is. It's a locker room mentality, right? I was talking to Josiah, and because they don't make him shower after gym in the high school. I mean, you had to shower in high school when I went to high school. If you participated in gym class, it was required for you to shower. You know what that meant? And they didn't have individual stalls in the showers. They had one room that opened up to about 20 shower heads. And I'm not trying to be perverse in church. I'm just saying it's not at all that uncommon for men to be naked in front of other men and not be worried about being naked in front of other men. There was no women on the boat.
The Navy used to be that way.
Right. It just is what it is. And again, it's not that there was, what's that? The Navy's still that way. Okay, yeah, she was in the Navy. Yeah. Not mixed, but well, you never know nowadays, so. Anyway, so it wasn't all that uncommon for men to be naked in the presence of other men, especially when they were working, especially when they were hot, right? You'd get down to your skimpies, your tighty-whities or whatever it is, and that's it. Now it says here, Peter went a little farther than that. He was naked. Okay, it's only common that when women are present that there's a stigmata about it. And that's because of a sense of decency and propriety.
That's Genesis.
That's the Genesis, absolutely, right? And many times when men are solely in the company of other men who are not queer, okay, there's no sexual component to being naked, right? It's not, okay? Men, and again, men walk naked with other men in locker rooms all the time. So that was all prior to the acceptance of homosexuality, though. Okay, so once that became prevalent, I guess all that kind of went away, right? There would no way I'd walk naked in a locker room in today's high school. I'd take a pair of swim shorts. I'd go to the bathroom. I'd go into a stall, change my swim shorts, and shower in that if I had to shower. Ain't no way. Not in today's society. You never know what's going to happen. You never know when some lady's going to walk in there. Oh, lady, lady's not the right term. When some woman who thinks she's a man walks in there, or a man who thinks he's a woman and walks into the women's locker room. right? and then there's a sense of impropriety, right? But in the presence of the Lord, there was apparently some shame that Peter felt. In the presence of the Lord, once he realized it's the Lord, there was apparently some shame that he felt, either from his nakedness or his personal shame from his denial, which we're going to get into at the end, near the middle of the chapter. That's one of the most powerful, to me. That's a very powerful story about his denial and his feed my lambs, feed my sheep stuff. That's a real powerful story. See, I see this as a funny scene. I see this, the way this happened, is if I was with the guys, the rest of the guys on the boat, I'd have laughed, right? John says, wait a second. That's the Lord. Peter goes, the Lord? Grab something and jump into the water. I don't want him to see me like this. And the rest of the guys are just laughing at him. Peter, always a nut job, Peter. He's the only one who's cutting it up and acting like a nut and all that other good stuff. I always splash right into the drink as soon as he realized he was naked standing in front of the Lord, right? So, yeah, that's the way I interpret that. And that's not an private interpretation. He was naked, and when he heard the Lord, and when he figured out it was the Lord, he grabbed his clothes and he jumped into the water, right? He cast himself into the sea. All right, verse 8. And the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits. That 200 cubits is about 300 feet. So 300 feet, 200 cubits. If you're doing it. Yeah, if you're doing 18 inches for a cubit, that'd be a royal cubit about that time. That would have been about 18 inches. That'd put it right about 300 feet, dragging in the net with fishes, okay? So, and then how they figured the cubit out was whoever the king was at the time, they would take this measurement from here to here, and that was a cubit. About 18 inches is about what it was. Sometimes it was 22, depending on the size of the guy. But anyway, so they came in from about 300 feet out, and they were dragging a net full of fish with them. Verse 9. And as soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire and coals there, and fish laid thereon, and bread. This is something real interesting here. They were out fishing, couldn't catch nothing. I mean, nothing. These are commercial fishermen. And the Lord shows up, and they're provided fish. Isn't that what happened? He said, cast your net out on the side, and they cast their net on the side, and they're in the process of dragging all that fish up to the shore. And when they get up to the shore, what do they find? They find that as soon as they were come to land, they saw fire and coals there, and fish laid thereupon, and bread. So when the guy asked them, have you any meat? And they said, no, we ain't got nothing. But then the Lord provided them with a blessing. And as they're bringing it in, they get there and realize that the Lord had the meat the whole time. They're provided the fish, but when they get to the shore, you see something. You see that the Lord had already provided a fire and fish broiling and bread. He didn't just provide the fish. He provided the fire, which is a difficult thing to do without. I mean, we take that for granted today. Has anybody here ever tried to start a fire using primitive methods, like a fire bow or a fire drill, or a flint and steel? That's tough work. Even a flint and steel, you got to get it just right, and that spark's got to catch something that's just perfect, and there can't be any wind, and there has to be, and you have to make the perfect kind of kindling and all that other stuff. It's difficult. It's not easy to do. So he provided a fire. He provided the fish already, and there was bread waiting there for him. So it goes to show that you can do all sorts of work that is often in vain, like they toiled all night in vain. but letting the Lord provide is often more fruitful. If they'd have just come to the shore, they'd have been provided for. But they honored the Lord, and they did what he said, and they had abundance of blessing, right? But if they would have just come to the shore, and they would have noticed that the Lord provides, and he's always faithful. And I'm not saying here to be lazy. We should work. We're supposed to provide for our families. It's supposed to be something that we do. See, sometimes when people take this thing about the Lord provides, the Lord provides, the Lord provides, sometimes he provides you with the means to do it yourself. Sometimes he provides you the job, does he not? Sometimes he doesn't just give you the money or the food. Sometimes he says, here's the opportunity to do it yourself. Amen? Yeah. So when you got to remember that when the job is not much of a blessing. You got to remember that when all you want to do is walk off the job site. You got to remember that when what you want to do is just give up and say, I quit, I'm done with this, I'll go find something else. No, the Lord provided that for you. Oh, the Lord will provide a blessing. No, he won't. Not after you squandered the one that he just gave you to provide for yourself. You think he's going to bless you when he gave you something and you threw it away? You think he's going to bless you with provision? Now, he'll give you your needs, don't get me wrong, right? He'll bring people along the way to bless you. But the real blessing was the ability to do it yourself. And I don't just mean about a job. You guys realize that you have the abilities to do things by yourselves that some people don't. That in itself is a blessing. And again, I'm not saying lazy here. We should work and we should provide, but the Lord will provide for us. Philippians chapter 4, where I think many of us know this verse. It says, "But my God shall supply your need according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus." That verse is often interpreted that the Lord's just going to give me everything that I need. That's not what it says. He says he'll provide your needs, not your wants, not your gains, the things that you need. You know what you need? You know what the Bible says you need to be content? Food and raiment. That one is a rough one for me. I tell you guys, I love this book. There are some verses that my flesh doesn't like very much. That's one of them. If you have food and raiment, you should therewith be content. Food and clothes. That does not say a house. That does not say a house. That says food and clothes. You got something on your back and you got something in your stomach. You got nothing to be griping about. I don't like that verse. My flesh does not like that verse. I like nice things, and it's not a sin to like nice things. But the Bible says he's going to supply all your needs. You know what your needs are? Food and clothes. That's it. And that's easy to come by, especially today. But notice he didn't just provide the fish. He provided the bread and the fire as well. So sometimes, not only does he supply your need, but he also supplies abundantly. Do you remember Elijah under the juniper tree? That's a great story about how even you can get into your own head sometimes, and you can get depressed, and you can feel downtrodden. And I mean, Elijah had just had a great victory over the prophets of Baal and the prophets of the groves. And Jezebel sent him a letter saying, next time I see you, I'm going to kill you. You'll be dead tomorrow. And what did he do? He ran after he just had this great victory and killed 400 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of the grove. And he ran, and he ran into a far country. He ran afar off for a long ways, and he finally got to a spot where he was tired and sore and hurting and hungry, and he just looked up at the heavens and he says, "What's going on? What just happened? I thought you were with me, Lord." He goes, just forget about this, Lord. Why don't you just let me die? I mean, that's one of the greatest preachers that ever lived. Elijah, man, he was a great man of God. So much so that he's going to be one of those two witnesses that comes back and does something for the Lord. So much so that he was on the Mount of Transfiguration with the Lord and Peter, James, and John. Right? I mean, you talk about a good man of God. You talk about a faithful servant. And know what he does? He says, my time's up, Lord, just kill me. I want to die. And you know what the Lord did? He could have honored that request. You know what the Lord did? He said, why don't you take yourself a nap? You're kind of cranky. And when he woke up, do you know what the angel had prepared for him? Had a fire and a cool drink of water and some bread. And you know what he did? He woke up and the angel says, hey, how was your nap? And he says, man, I haven't slept like that in ages. And he says, you hangry? He supplied the need for rest. Now he's going to supply the need for substance. And he says, here's some food, and here's some water, and here's some oil. And he says, why don't you go ahead and just lay back down underneath that juniper tree, and I'll keep watch for you. And he goes back to sleep. And when he wakes up, he doesn't have the need. He doesn't have the desire to just let me die. That's what the Lord does. He doesn't he doesn't supply us what we think we need. He supplies us what we really need. Elijah didn't need to die. Elijah just needed a little bit of comfort. And that's what the Lord supplied. He just needed a little bit of comfort. He just needed a little bit of support. He just needed that little bit of, hey, why don't you just stop for a moment and let me take care of you. Moments. I mean, that's all he needed. And you know, a little bit later he got that kind of inkling again in that cave, and I understand that, but you got to understand the Lord did that for him to show him something. And he did that for him to show us something. That sometimes all we need is a nice comfy bed and a hot meal to lift our spirits. Sometimes we just need to take a step back and let the Lord provide something for us and just to take care of us for a second. Sometimes we need that. I mean, everybody likes to be taken care of from time to time, don't they? Us men, when we're sick, man, we're babies, aren't we? You guys are like, no, I am. I'll admit it. I don't care. When I'm sick, just don't look at me. Don't touch me. Just leave me alone. All I want to do is I want the pillow over. I want the covers over my head, and I don't want nobody to even look at me. I mean, just leave me alone. I don't want to get up and go to the bathroom. I don't want to get up and go get food. I mean, you talking about, isn't it nice to have somebody who cares enough for you just to take care of you when you're sick like that? You kiddos, isn't it nice to have someone to take care of you when you're sick? Mommy take care of you? Yeah. Yes. Right? Sometimes we need that. And the Lord provides that for us, that comfort for us. He supplies all of our needs, not just the food, not just the clothing. He supplies all of our needs. We'll go ahead and wrap it up there. And we'll pick it back up in verse 10 next week. I want you to notice in verse 10 that even though he provided the blessing, he provided his own food and his own fire and his own water, that he still allowed them to catch the fish and keep it. So even though he provides for you, he still allows you your own provision. Any questions? Any comments? You want to pray us out, please? Yeah.